These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values.
I wasn't asking about signals. I'm sorry, my time is short. I only have about 30 seconds. I refer you to the NCCM statement of October 8th in response to October 7th. Why did the NCCM statement of October 8th fail to mention the word Hamas? A day after the October 7th attack, why did your organization, in the statement that it issued, why did it not mention the word Hamas once?
I don't know how that's even relevant to the provisions that we're discussing here.
Oh, yeah.
MP Lawton going first for 6 minutes. Ensuite, la députée Dillon. Ensuite, le député Fortin, 6 minutes chaque. Deuxième tour, M. Baber, 5 minutes. Chang, 5 minutes. Fortin, 2 minutes et demie. Gunn et Housefather avec 5 minutes chaque. Donc, je commence avec le député Lawton. Andrew.
Thank you to all the witnesses for your time and analysis on this. I'd like to start with you, Professor Party, and because you're joining us virtually, you didn't have the privilege of seeing the Liberal members of this committee snickering as you were talking about the Liberal government's assaults on civil liberties in the past. But I think that is important context for what we're seeing here, because in your opinion, these are not benign provisions. These are significant expansions of the power of the state to regulate thoughts and emotions and expressions, correct?
Correct, yes.
So when you look at language, and I'll ask you this as well after Professor Alford, but first, Professor Party, in your analysis of legislation in the past and your knowledge of statutes, when words are omitted from jurisprudence, that is not what codification of jurisprudence is, correct?
Correct, yes.
So explain in practice, if you are a police officer that is doing an investigation or you are a judge weighing in on this, how significant is the omission of the words extreme manifestation from the definition of hate that exists in the common law now to the one that C9 puts in law in the criminal code?
Yes, so thank you for the question. And this is really Professor Alford's point. You have a common law, you have a jurisprudential context. The Supreme Court of Canada, in the 2012 case of Whatcott, describing what was a reasonable limit on freedom of expression. And let's just underline this. They said that this was a reasonable limit, but they also said that this is an infringement of freedom of speech. So what you have to start with in C9 is an infringement of freedom of speech. This definition does infringe freedom of speech. That's what the Supreme Court says. Okay, so this is an infringement from a government that claims to be a government of the Charter and of rights. So we start there, and then if you fiddle with the wording, if you leave words out, if you make it detestation or vilification and not and, for example, then you are downgrading the threshold above which you need to get in order to find that this is established, right? So it's a little bit of playing around with the words so as to appear as though you're doing exactly what the Supreme Court said, while you're not really doing that at all.
And I'll go to you on this, Professor Alford. I believe you did review the Minister of Justice's testimony on Bill C9, and in that he said, and I'll quote directly from what the minister remarked here. He was asked about the definition. He said, "This was not an attempt to dilute the definition. It was an attempt to make good on the spirit of that definition and provide clarity to law enforcement." What is your view on the minister's characterization of his own bill, Professor Alford?
It's incorrect. And I would say that the problem is that the courts are going to look at the decision to use this particular language that omits the language from Whatcott that I cited in my testimony and say, well, that's clearly an intentional decision. You made the decision, seeing what was written in Whatcott, to leave this out. Now, the most ominous possibility here is what's going on behind the scenes, is that the government is actually seeking a ruling from the Supreme Court in due course that would lower the threshold to what they're putting forward in this bill. They're saying, well, you said that in 2013. If you uphold what we wrote into this bill, which intentionally left out some of the language that Justice Rothstein, since retired from the court, of course, included in that judgment, that you will then say that this is a reasonable limitation on freedom of speech. And I think that's particularly dangerous.
Explain to me, if you could, Professor, and I realize that hate is inherently subjective, which is the problem that we've been identifying with this, but what would the practical application be in your view? What would be captured by this new definition that isn't captured under the existing definition, just to demonstrate how this dilution and this lowering of threshold is actually happening? Or is there no way to make such a prediction right now?
Well, I think there is, Mr. Lawton. I would just say, if you look at what's happening in the United Kingdom right now, now remember, there's no entrenched right to freedom of expression in the United Kingdom. They don't have anything like the Charter, which creates that right. So there you have speech that purportedly abrogates the dignity of individuals or groups. That's the basis for complaints to the police, and arrests are being made on that basis. Now, that's what the language from Whatcott that is left out in the proposed definition of 319 sub 7 would allow, precisely that, people to make complaints that what someone's saying is hatred. And the reason why it's hatred is because it's an intentional attempt to infringe their dignity as an individual or members of a protected group. So we've seen quite a lot of this in the United Kingdom, particularly with very charged issues such as competing rights around what's called gender identity issues and women's rights, where you've had many people who felt like they were engaging in good faith, who are now the subject of visits from the police and then arrests because of the complaint that what they've said and the way that they've engaged on this issue is engaging and detrimental to the dignity of the people with whom they engage.
It's a valid point, Professor, and I know that Minister Fraser had mentioned to my colleague, Mr. Baber, that it was, quote, far-fetched to imagine UK-style tweet policing in Canada, and then moments later, he admitted that Bill C-9 will cover what people say on the internet. So very quickly, is that a legitimate concern for Canadians if C-9 passes, Professor?
It's eminently legitimate, Mr. Lawton.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Over to where we at? Mr. Baber for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Al-Azim, you're Director of Legal Affairs for the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I want to talk to you about Section 319. Do you know what the phrase intifada means?
Yes.
What does it mean?
Intifada means is a form of revolution.
It's a violent resistance, correct?
There are a number of different intifadas. There was a bread intifada in Egypt that came in. It was about economic
In the context of
revolution,
intifada against Jews in the state of Israel, intifada is violent resistance. Are you going to suggest that it doesn't involve violence?
I think it can involve violence, but I think it can also not involve. Are we really having a discussion about Arabic translation right now? I speak Arabic. Do you speak Arabic?
I speak a little bit of Arabic. So
okay.
I thank you for conceding that in that context it involves violence. So now the term intifada is shouted every day on Canada's streets, whether it's Viva Viva Intifada or Globalize the Intifada, which means bring the Intifada here to Canada. So in your view, when that is being chanted in a North York neighborhood, is that incitement to violence or not?
Let me be clear. This has always been the case of the position of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. If anybody is espousing any form of hatred against any group, and that includes anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, any other group against an identifiable group, that is incorrect.
I'm talking about the second section in 319. I'm not talking about hatred. I'm talking about incitement to violence, which is the other section. So my question to you again, if you already concede that this is violence and it is shouted on Canadian streets, do you agree with me that the chant globalize the Intifada or Viva Intifada is incitement to violence, yes or no?
I think that your question actually really belies a lot of the problems with bringing this bill forward, and I think it belies some of the let's say motivations behind bringing it at this point. I think Professor Party was referring to the convoy. We saw a number of hate slogans and hateful logos and symbols around the convoy. We saw a number of them.
Okay,
there was no attempt to bring a bill like this forward. So I think, if anything, your question is actually belying that this is meant in order to curb the civil liberties of the millions of Canadians who have taken to the streets peacefully
Thank you.
to oppose genocide.
I'm perplexed that a Canadian lawyer somehow could justify incitement to violence. I'm also a lawyer, and I'm very perplexed by her position. Hamas is a listed terrorist entity in Canada. Do you think it should be legal to fly a Hamas flag on a Canadian street?
To be clear, this bill goes much beyond that. And
Just answer my question, please. I'm not asking beyond. I'm just asking about the flag. Should it be lawful? Should it be lawful to fly Hamas flag in North York?
I think that it really depends on a lot of different things. What's the intention of the person flying it? And again, this is why something of this nature that impacts civil liberties does need to be examined very clearly. And I'd just like to say that I did not concede that Intifada is violent. I specifically did not concede that.
All right. And if a person is chanting Intifada and they're holding a flag of a terrorist entity like Hezbollah, should that be criminalized in your view or not?
Again, my view is that this bill it's not even scratching that surface, because let me give you an example of what we've seen and my concern for this bill. Over the last year, we've seen Shia, members of the Muslim Shia community every year take to a procession, right? It's called the Arba'in, and they take to the streets. They took to the streets in Montreal wearing a green headband with Arabic calligraphy on it.
I wasn't asking about symbols. I'm sorry, my time is short. I only have about 30 seconds. I refer you to the NCCM statement of October 8th in response to October 7th. Why did the NCCM statement of October 8th fail to mention the word Hamas? A day after the October 7th attack, why did your organization, in the statement that it issued, why did it not mention the word Hamas once?
I don't know how that's even relevant to the provisions that we're discussing here.
Why did your statement fail to condemn the October 7th attack?
So what? Sorry, listen, with all due respect, I think that my community has overseen the largest deadly attacks against an identifiable group in the G7 in the past few years, and I think that I've had to attend the burial of my community members.
Do you condemn the October 7th attack? The political class
has allowed to fester, in part because of a lot of the rhetoric
do you condemn the October 7th attack by Hamas? Do you condemn it?
Do you condemn Israeli genocide?
I'm asking the question.
I condemn the death of any innocent life. Do you?
Thank you, Ms. Alazem. Thank you, Mr. Baber.
As a European, I am a European, actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah,
Oh.
I'm an Irish citizen. Yeah, so there you
welcome.
go.
Welcome.
Speaking as a European.
WTF.
Here, here.
How many kids did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein?
More than just elbows.
And as the most European of the non-European countries,
being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought
What possible
to avoid.
conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance.
These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values.
Hi, everyone. Congratulations, you're spending more money on taxes than on food, clothing, and shelter combined.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
All right, gang, thank you all very much for watching. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe. Smash that subscribe. We're trying to grow this thing. Canadian Federal Politics. Get yours right here. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next video.